Hi folks, welcome back to the Z4. So I finally managed to get back out to the track. I've done quite a few other bits and pieces to the car, but I wanted to make sure I got to the track so we had some footage to share before I did another video, because me chattering on gets a bit boring without some sort of footage and a bit of spanking it around the track in between and with some stuff going on in the background. So pleased to say we've been to the track, got to Blyton Park just for a couple of hours, but enough to, you know, form some opinions, see if we're going in the right direction. So I've got my bit of paper with all my updates on for this year. So things I've been doing since the last videos. Right, we made it stiffer and we added more camber at the front. So we've added a Hotchkiss front anti-roll bar, which is a nice sexy hollow bar like the E46 CSL bar. It's 30mm thick, so it's quite a lot stiffer, and it's hollow, so we've actually saved 1.5 kilos over an E46 M3 bar. So nice tight front end. Thinking being with a nice big front end anti-roll bar with the McPherson strut is that you're doing your best to maintain the camber angles through the corner. McPherson strut, I understand the camber curves aren't as good as with something like a dual wishbone like on an MX-5, so you want to try and keep the front end flat so you can maintain as much camber as possible through the corners. That's the theory, at least from what I've read. So that's what I'm trying to do here. So Hotchkiss, that one was, took absolutely ages to arrive, so if you want one, get ready for a wait. Front springs, they were 5 kilos with the V2 KW coilovers as standard. I've got up to 8, so quite a hefty increase, and that should roughly be aligned to something like a KW Club Sport at the front now. The rear springs are actually shared between all the different versions, so they're the same as a Club Sport already. So we've just brought things up in line with the Club Sport. And I've also added stage 2 camber plates from Ian at Carbotech. They're not adjustable beyond the slotting of the standard turrets, but they've given me a lot more camber. I have also further slotted the standard turrets, and I've also slotted the strut brace to allow me to make the adjustments. Which brings me on to the next thing, actually, alignment. I'm trying to learn how to do alignments. Alignments are becoming quite expensive. In fact, I'm amazed at how expensive alignments can be sometimes. And I'm really keen to learn about it. I'm kind of geeky when it comes to suspension and alignment and stuff. And I want to be able to make changes, see how the car drives, and then drive it again, make a change, see how it feels. So I'm teaching myself alignment. We've ended up with 3.6 degrees of negative camber at the front, 2.9 degrees of negative camber at the rear, parallel toe at the front, and I've been quite conservative. I've got 3mm aside of rear toe in, and that's because of the behaviour at Cadwell last time. So it was, whether it was under bump or whether it was just movement in the rear trailing arm bush that was adding sort of dynamic toe and making the car oversteer quite erratically. So I've put in 3mm of toe in at the rear with the idea that even under bump, it's not going to pass through that 0 degrees. I've since learned that I've probably been a bit too conservative with that, but that's what I've gone for. Alongside of that, we got the Powerflex Black rear trailing arm bushes, so Powerflex helping out again with those. And as I've said, the object of the exercise there is to remove any movement and hopefully remove or reduce dynamic tow. So I'm not towing out at the rear under brakes, and try and maintain that nice consistent feel and drive around the track. So we've added those. Also from Powerflex gearbox mounts. So yeah, I'm a bit of a knob really, because sometimes I find myself changing gear almost still whilst cornering or whilst there's still some load on the car, and I find it really difficult to locate the gear in this car. So I've added some gearbox mounts to try and hopefully make that easier and improve the feel of things. Other bits and bobs, oil cooler. So this car needs to be able to be driven around the track you know, fairly repeatedly, and I don't want to worry about temps. So we've got an oil cooler on now, using, get this, I'm using a BMW M2 oil thermostat. So there we go, I've got M-Power parts on this car. We've moved to Miller's EE Performance 5W40 just to give the engine a bit more protection. That was recommendation of Miller's. Normal caveat applies. I'm trusting them. They might be trying to flog me stuff, or they might be trying to help me, one of the two, or maybe both. So I choose to trust them, and I'm doing, you know, what they're advising me to do. We did another oil analysis and the engine looks beautiful, so doing what I can to make sure I'm maintaining the car and checking it before using it on track. Braking, added some front brake ducts that go to the fog lights. Mike Hodgson is the chap that makes those. They're a really nice piece actually. There'll be some little clips in here or pictures that you can see those, so get a bit of air onto the caliper and onto the disc. I've also added some brass caliper guides to try and, you know, give better braking feel and make sure the pad wear's nice and even and pad pressure's nice and even. Fresh fluid, I think we've gone for a Motul RBF 660 or 670, one of the two, I'm not sure what they're called nowadays. And for the track now, it's an RPX pad at the front, changing back to a blue stuff for the road. Rear is blue stuff all the time. And the other change, I got some ex-race car Dunlop Durezas 225 square. Durezas are a tyre we really like. Dan uses them on the MR2 and we really rate them. When they come off race cars, they're well past the best. They've been heat cycled to oblivion generally, so it's potluck. Object of the exercise being, you know, if they're cheap and they're not just going to melt on track, then, you know, it allows me to get to the track more. And I know the Durez is a fairly good tyre, so if I get a good set, I do all right. If I get a fairly bad set, then whatever, it's, you know, might be no faster than an AD09 or an RS2R, but you know, it's cheap. It's not costing me 600 quid a set. So driving impressions, it's much improved. Starting to feel like we're making some good progress with the car, and it's starting to feel more at home on the track. I think the extra camber really goes a long way to help that, and I think the overall improved roll stiffness is helping that as well. My impressions now is that they actually still need to go up further, so I'm going to increase the front roll stiffness some more with some slightly stiffer springs, and I'm going to try and increase the rear quite dramatically with some stiffer springs. Of course, being a divorce setup at the rear, I can swap out springs for track use. So even if they make the car a bit uncomfortable, ride quality suffers, I can switch them out really quickly with them being divorced. So that's not too much of a problem. And hopefully that'll transform it on the track. The rear trailing arm bushes and the dynamic toe, I've only been to Blyton, so I've not had those compressions and those bumps at Cadwell, so I feel like I have to reserve judgment to a degree, but it was all very tied down and yeah, sensible. There was no lariness at all. There was none of that dynamic toe feeling at Blyton. I honestly can't remember whether I felt that before at Blyton, because I did more Cadwells than Blyton, but it felt very tied down. For me, it felt like the front end could have done with being better. The rear end was, if anything, just a bit too stable and reliable. It didn't really want to oversteer. It did rotate fairly nicely with some braking into the corners, but you know, it wasn't a pointy thing. So, you know, we're gonna keep trying. Gear change is improved actually with the Powerflex transmission bushes. What I will say is that's the single thing I've done that's added the most NVH. For some reason, there's more noise now, and having changed that than there ever was before. So I would probably say if it's a track car, go for it. If it's a predominantly road car, I'd try and find a stiffened rubber, frankly. Yeah, that seemed to have added a bit of noise. It's not intolerable, and I'm very sensitive to these things, probably a bit of the tism or something. Yeah, I'm a bit pipe and slippers. I like my cars to to be nice and quiet on the road, so I'm a bit sensitive to these things. So yeah, from a driving perspective, that's improved things. It has added a little bit of NVH. Brakes, Cadwell gives the car a rough old time, doesn't it, on brakes? So they didn't feel amazing. Bit disappointing, to be honest. The RPX is a good pad. The fluid should be fine. It's not particularly heavy. We're 1350, me maybe 100 with my stuff, 1450. It's not loads of weight, is it? And it's not super powerful. What are we on, 325mm discs? I don't know. BMW just aren't very good at brakes, are they? They're not. Mazda seem to cope pretty well, although their cars are lighter. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's the worst you're going to encounter, isn't it, Blyton? It's torture for brakes. And they were fine, don't get me wrong. They didn't fade at all. They were consistent. There was never anything unpleasant. They just didn't feel quite as strong and confidence inspiring as I would have liked and perhaps expected. So, I mean, they'll feel perfect at Cadwell or at Donington and other places. They'll be fine at the ring. It's just Blyton's murder for brakes. And the tyres, they were fine. They weren't stellar. They weren't like jumping in Dan's MR2 for grip. You know, that's some nice fresh set that he bought brand new. But I think they were a little step up from the D-Max. I did 4 sessions that I crammed into a couple of hours on the end of a javelin day. Thank you very much for getting me on track, javelin. And straight out the box, actually, I think it was you know, my first session I set my fastest lap of the day by looking at the videos, and I think it was a 1:12.1, which is quite good now. I was quite pleased with that. So straight up to pace, you know, tells you the car's nice and easy to drive, nice and confidence inspiring. Straight up to pace, and I did another 1:12.1 and some other lap times in that sort of region. But it's difficult to get a completely empty track, isn't it? Chasing people down and trying to get past traffic. So yeah, 1:12.1, it's promising, isn't it? I think it would be nice, wouldn't it, long term, to try and get to 1:10 or below, wouldn't it? Maybe sub 1:10 sooner or later, and you know, sub 1:40. That's a dream, isn't it, at Cadwell? Sub 1:40. Who knows? But yeah, it's moving in the right direction. And I must say, the best possible mod for track days is not modifying your air conditioning. Working aircon is perhaps the best thing on a car at track day, and something I've missed in other cars. So absolute godsend. Yeah, I think just overall impressions, it still feels like the car's really quite filtered at the track. Feels like your inputs and the reaction are a little bit delayed still, and feels like you don't get too much information through the bum and through the steering wheel. Hopefully I can continue to move that in the right direction. And somewhat difficultly, yeah, the real weakest link of the car now is the seating, the ergonomics, and being held in place. So I'm fairly broad across the top, and I sort of sit on top of these seats rather than down within them, and so it really doesn't do much to keep me in place. I do use a CG lock on the belt at the bottom, which holds the hips in place, but you know, around left-hand bends I'm sort of up against the window, and then I'm having to try and wedge myself, almost using my knees and stuff, around the right-handers. So that is easily the weakest link, and probably, you know, stops me from going faster or being under more control. When I look at the videos, I'm looking at the way I'm moving, and instead of driving nicely and neatly with my hands and with my wrists, I'm driving with my shoulders. I'm trying to stay where I am and stuff, which is not the best way I like to drive. I like to be light hands, and you know, I don't mind bullying a car, but I want to do so, or attempt to do so, with degree of finesse and feel. So yeah, that's definitely where I'm looking next. Get some seats in the car. I have lost a bit of weight from the car as well, but that's going to be another video, so you have to wait for that. So I hope you've enjoyed this very quick run through all the various upgrades I've done. Feel free to ask any questions. I'll address them in the comments or in a future video, and hopefully I've put some footage in as well, so you can enjoy that. So I'll keep you abreast of the next updates. A bit of weight loss will be the next one, and I'll catch you on the next one.